Welcome everybody to this Data Europa Academy webinar. My name is Inma Farfan Velasco and I'm here today with my colleagues Aga, Hagar and Julia. And we work all of us in the EU Opinata sector at the Publications Office of the European Union. So today the webinar will be on Data.europa.eu, the official portal for European data. Next slide, please. Okay, so before we start, some rules of the game to ensure a smooth presentation. So this presentation will be recorded and published online, so you don't have to worry in case you want to share with your colleagues in the future with other people who may have missed it. We suggest you to please mute yourself, but in case of any question throughout the whole presentation, do not hesitate to ask it in the chat, and we will be very happy to answer to it at the end of the presentation in the Q&A. So this is a very special webinar for us. This is the first of many. It's a special occasion, the first kickoff. So this comes together with a training package that we created for data providers. This doesn't mean that in case you are not a data provider, this is not interesting for you. But we created this learning package specifically to guide data providers through Data.europa.eu and improve the data publishing and the access to information through the portal. So why of this webinar? So Data.europa.eu is the gateway to open data information coming from the public sector, from institutions, European Parliament, national, regional, local geoportals. So here, data providers play an essential role in the whole publishing process. And we realized that in the last years, with the relationships with them, the same question were getting repeated every time, and they're the very specific needs that they had. So next slide, Julia, please. So according to this, we created this learning corner for data providers. So today is the first one. We're going to have monthly webinars on very specific topics. So today we're going to introduce you to the general service of the portal, what's in for you, no matter you're a data provider or on any other data enthusiast. What are the benefits from it? What's the benefits of open data? Then we're going to have another 2 webinars, more conceptual, that we're going to dive into the definition of open data from a technical and legal point of view. And later on, we'll move from theory to action. So we're going to talk about how to publish this data, manually or automatically. So we will present the tools for it, especially for the public sector that are our data providers. And then from then we're going to go on the direction of presenting inspirational use cases. So next slide, please. Great. So autumn is coming. It's time to have a walk through the forest, and we really hope that you enjoy this journey with us and you learn something out of it. So we're gonna start with the more existential questions. Who are we and why do we exist? And then we're gonna try to respond to some of these questions and go into open data in a nutshell, the concept behind it and what we understand by open data. Then we're gonna go into the more pragmatic presentation of the portal. What's in for you? What are the different benefits? What's the different services behind it? And just to finalize, we're going to have Julie, who will introduce us to the potential of open data and how open data can be turned into innovative services with the Open Data Competition EU Datathon. Next slide, Julia. So who are we and why do we exist? Next slide. So as I was mentioning before, we work in the EU Open Data sector of the Publications Office of the European Union. So the Publications Office in the European Union, in case you don't know, is the interinstitutional provider, service provider. So it's an official provider of publishing services to EU institutions, agencies, and body. And it also provides a central point of access to official information. This official information can go from EU law, procurement notices, research results with CORDIS, open data in this case, and general publications. And with this, with the access to this information, we support EU policies and ensure that information created by these public administrations are available to everyone, ensuring that there is trustworthiness, transparency, accessibility to the information, and at the same time, very service-oriented. So we respond to the needs of citizens and of this community. So here in this framework of the Publications Office, where is Data.europa.eu? So Data.europa.eu is the portal that provides access to data, open data from the public sector. So it means from EU institutions, agencies, and bodies, so the more supranational context, to national, regional, local data portals, so at this level. So next slide, please. So diving a little bit more into the concept, Data.europa.eu is a catalog of metadata, which means that it describes the data while the meta remains stored on the data provider's websites in general. So we don't store normally the data ourselves. So it provides a single access point to this information coming from national data portals from Spain, European Parliament datasets, Eurostat. So it combines all these datasets, ensuring interoperability, machine readability, and some accessibility to the data. So there's possibility of data linking, linking of information, and then it gives like a lot of value to this information. But it's not only a catalog of metadata, but it also provides other wide range of services that we're going to talk about it today. So it provides not only data, but studies, it provides reports, applications, learning material, news and data stories on data, and other several events. Next slide, please. So Data.europa.eu is a single point of access to information, but who are the publishers of this information? So as I was mentioning before, it comes from different angles. So it comes from the original EU Opinata portal, that it was the portal that it was publishing data from EU institutions, agencies, and bodies. And then we had the European data portal that it was publishing data from geoportals, national data portals, etc., etc. So now we consolidated both services to provide a real single point of access. And now we have this single portal, according to several policies and strategy on open data. So the public sector here, made by the public sector, is one of the most data-intensive sectors in terms of processing, collecting, and paying for vast amounts of data. So open data here plays a very essential role, and it's very important that it's made available to the public. So here, Data.europa.eu makes this possible with this open data website that is available for you. But there's some kind of context, legal history, policy behind it. So there's like a kind of legal foundation behind it. Next slide, please, Julia. Okay, so according to the Data.europa.eu, since it gives access to this information, it's true that in the last decades, we have seen like more a digital transition throughout the years, and there are like more initiatives, more strategy, policies, regulation on this respect in order to create a data to build up this EU data economy. So the Commission itself, they put in place the decision of 2011, because the Commission was itself a huge producer and holder of public sector information that could be somehow reused, creating added value information products. So this decision determined the conditions to reuse these documents, this documentation, that were held by the European Commission in order to create some sort of economic activity, lead to a wider reuse of and spread of information produced by the Commission, and also enhance an image of openness. So after this reuse decision, it was when EU Open Data Portal was created in 2012, giving access to information from EU institutions, agencies, and bodies. At the national level, we had the directive of 2013, that it was amending the decision of 2003 or the Public Sector Information Directive, that is set up a kind of a framework for the dissemination of data managed by the public sector in the European Union, and also influence on the open government data. With this decision in 2013, it was built, this decision was built into two specific pillars, that was transparency and fair competition of data. Then we also had the recast, so the directive of 2019. So there was a revision with a public consultation, and the European Commission proposed a revision of the PSI directive as a part of a package of measures aiming to facilitate the common data space in the European Union. It also proposed define the high-value datasets, that is defined data that is associated with important benefits for the society and the economy when they are reused. So this is like a very big step forward. And high-value datasets are subject to a separate set of rules ensuring their availability free of charge in machine-readable formats, provided in API, and where relevant in bulk download. So then again, coming back to the Commission, after its reuse decision, there was also the decision on Creative Commons, that is an open license. And the Commission decided to join other public institutions around the world in using standard, legally interoperable tools, like Creative Commons in this case, to share a wide range of content that they produce. So in case you're interested, I suggest you to go to this decision. And then, like more at European level, we also had the European Strategy for Data, that we wanted to make the European Union a role model for the society empowered by data. And I was aiming to make the EU a leader in a data-driven society and putting really data at the cornerstone of this data transition. With this, it came many different proposals, the Data Single Market, Data Act, Data Governance Act. Here I wanted to highlight the Data Governance Act that seeks to increase the trust in data sharing, strengthening the mechanisms to increase data availability, and also overcome the technical barriers and obstacles that you can find reusing the data. So it proposed new European way of data governance to facilitate data sharing across the different sectors of Europe. So it was already a very big step forward. Also, other proposals on the table are the Data Act, that was a proposal by the European Commission to measure a fair and innovative data economy that wanted to set up certain rules to access data in all the economic sectors. And then the Implementing Act of High-Value Datasets, that is that they're drafting an implementing regulation specifying high-value datasets and which ones should be made available for reuse. So really trying to specify. With this initiative, it came also the European Data Port and then Data.europa.eu. So we could see how the different outputs of this legislation is linked to these specific portals. But also it's important to mention that not only the Commission or at European level, it was established different type of policies. It's true that it's like a movement that we have been seeing throughout the years, also in other institutions like the Court of Auditors or the Council, that they wanted to reuse their documents and make it available to the public. Next slides, please. So Data.europa.eu is a metadata catalog that provides access to open data. So basically, we connect knowledge, we collect open data from different public administrations. We put them at your fingerprints, so you can access to the data. You can use the different open data services that we have, and then putting this at the fingerprints of the society, we're improving our economy, better informing citizens, and improving the decision-making process. So now I'm gonna pass the floor to Hagar, who is gonna explain open data in a nutshell. So Hagar?
Thank you, Ima. So yes, what is open data? But quickly put, can we go to the next slide, please? So simply put, it's any data that's made available with an open license. Ima mentioned the Creative Commons International by 4. She's one of the one we use most. And a definition that you will find in the link to this slide, which we will share later, is that open data is data that can be freely used, reused, and redistributed by anyone, subject at most to the requirement of being attributed and share alike. This definition comes from the Open Knowledge Foundation, who many of you might actually be using CICAN, of which they are the maintainers. So basically it means that data needs to be available and accessible for free, or at most for the price of the cost of production. It should be easy to access. So today it basically means over the internet, possibly, and delivered in an open format. That is a format that can be easily used and modified. So a PDF is not a very good format for sharing data, of course, nor are proprietary formats. For example, I'm thinking of a DWG of AutoCAD, because you need a licensed software just to open it. So that would not be a good format. It means that the data can be reused and redistributed, preferably with the allowance of modifying it. So a good example is when you take different sources of data coming from various places and combine them into something new. This is where the driving and innovative force of open data is. And these principles need to be applied universally. It cannot be restricted to any specific or exclude any specific group of users or of activities. So even a restriction of the license for commercial reuse is not an open license, really. Next slide, please. So now we move into how to actually make this open data consumable. And here you may have heard of the FAIR principle: findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable data. But maybe we should let's start from the beginning and specify what the word metadata means, because you will hear it a lot during this presentation. So metadata, like Ima already said, is data about data. But the thing is, with the digital society, it needs to be formalized. In the old, if you see, for example, any article or read a book and you see one part in bold letters which are a bit bigger, you know that's the title. But with think of an HTML text, that's not so anymore. You need to say that this part of the text is the title and this is actually the content. You need to declare it in a specific way, and this declaration, so basically saying title and then the text, that's the metadata. So as I was saying, the FAIR principles go the next step and help us reuse, actually being able to find and reuse the data. It's an initiative born from down to up by a group of scientists, basically, who encountered many difficulties in finding the data and being able to reuse it without problems. They came up with these 4 principles. So findable, I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but to give an example of what's not findable, if you publish your data on a portal that's only open to a few people and not very public, that's not findable. If you put it in an obscure web page somewhere and it comes up number 50 on the Google search results, that's not very findable. Accessible means that it needs to be clear how to access the data. For example, if you need to register to being able to download it, then it should be clearly indicated. And one thing about accessibility, which I will mention because I know it's not always clear, that even if the data is removed and is no longer available, the metadata should be kept. So this guarantees accessibility in the long run. It should be interoperable. This is really important to allow meaningful reuse. So, for example, let's imagine a tabular data, so an Excel sheet or a CSV file, where we talk about 2 things that are the same. For example, an external code used by some agency. I was thinking of maybe a code from for this a list of local marine species, which you have an internal code and then make reference to an external code, say the FAO registry. In one table, it will show with the title, and the title of the column is really metadata. If you think about it, it will be called an external identifier. And in another one, it will be called something else. How do we know we're actually talking about the same thing? If you don't use metadata, if you don't use documentation, this will not be clear. Already difficult for people, but for machines, it's impossible to understand. So to have interoperability and easily exchanging data, knowing that we're actually talking about the same thing, we need to make extensive use of standardized vocabularies and model and knowledge representation schemes, so basically ontologies. And reuse, this is the ultimate goal of the FAIR principles. So if the first three principles are observed, reuse is greatly facilitated. Next slide, please. And what are the benefits of open data? So I think because we cannot really know when the data is open and there is no restriction on its reuse, we don't really know all the benefits that it may have. We can only imagine, but surely some of the important and already present benefits of open data is the increased transparency and civic. It basically it really contributes to the solidness of democracy in a transparent way, involving participation from any sector of the society, of the civil society. Having the data obviously supports creation of new products and services, and it is a real drive for innovation economically and beyond. We have many examples where you could see increased efficiency and effectiveness of governmental services thanks to open data. So basically citizens and journalists analyzing that data and pointing the finger at what could be done better. Then, of course, it enables gaining new knowledge from combining different data sources together into something new. You have a link. I'm not going to go into the slide because we don't have that much time, but I really suggest you use the link in the slide to read about some of the tangible economic benefits of using open data. So next slide, please. And now let's go start talking about the portal. So next slide, please, Julia. So what's Data.europa.eu and how does it support open data? In this slide, we put 4 main aspects of how we do that. So we give access to the data, and now more than ever, after we consolidated the EU Open Data Portal with the European Data Portal, there is really one place to go to find all official European data. We actually store all the metadata and give access to it. And we give access both in a user interface way and through endpoints, so both to humans and to machines. You can query and retrieve all the metadata directly. We actually actively encourage data reuse, and my colleague Julia will speak about one of these examples in the EU Data Zone shortly. And we work to increase open data literacy across Europe. Next slide, please. So if you've ever been on our website, I'm sure you are familiar with the homepage with all these numbers. So more than 170 catalogs from 36 countries, and more than almost 1.5 million datasets. But what do these numbers actually mean? So I think we should start with the word catalog because it's not very clear sometimes. I should specify that it is a specific term coming from the data model we use to describe the data, which is DCAT, the data catalog vocabulary, where it is defined as a curated collection of metadata about data resources. So mostly about data sets, but not only. So the collection or the metadata catalog is normally also curated by a single agent. It can be, for example, the national agency responsible for digital services or for open data. It can be and the agency collecting geospatial data in keeping with the INSPIRE directive. It can be an EU institution, but also we have a few NGOs and cross-country European organizations collecting data on a specific theme. 36 countries, you might be wondering how come so many countries? So first thing, it's not limited to member states of the European Union. Any European country can publish on our portal. And often one country will have more than one catalog. A classic example is one open data catalog for national governmental data sets and one for geospatial data sets. And then the last number, you will imagine from the big number that this is maybe the heart of the portal. So a lot of data sets. And next slide, please. So what are data sets? And here you have the definition again from the DCAT vocabulary. It is a collection of data published or curated by a single agent and available for access or download in one or more representations, so file formats. Sorry. And how do we actually group them together in one place? Following, again, standards. So we already spoke about the FAIR principles. I will show you shortly how it's actually implemented on the portal. And then DCAT application profile, which is the metadata ontology we use. Next slide, please. So, okay, we already went through the FAIR, but just to see quickly how it works. By publishing on Data.europa.eu, you basically automatically have a guarantee a good level of observance of the FAIR principles, because the data is accessible, it's easy to access, it's clear where to look for it. Like I said, we also have endpoints in API and Sparkle for machine consumption. So to access the data, you just click once and you have it. So it's really accessible. It is okay, findable clearly because there is one point. And also, I forgot to mention, all the datasets are translated to all 24 official EU languages, so more findable than that. I cannot think of many portals that offer such assistance. We have a good search interface with search of indexes based on title, descriptions, keywords, and also filters that facilitate the findability even more. The interoperability we are going to talk a little bit about more shortly, but DCAT basically guarantees that. We also use a lot of common vocabularies, and reuse, again, is our ultimate goal. So next slide, please. So the DCAT application profile, we are here in the realm of web semantics. I am not obviously going to go much into that, but just to be clear, you can read more and we'll provide some links if you're interested, but maybe just a small introduction to the RDF, which is the Resource Description Framework. It's a W3C standard on how to describe data in a semantic way. So in this image, you can see in the top node or circle is the URI identifier of a data set. Then we use another URI taken from the Dublin Core metadata scheme to say that this data set is published by, and at the bottom, we have the name of the publisher. And this is how we say things in semantic webs. And DCAT is, of course, an RDF vocabulary. So then, and the application profile of DCAT is it's an application profile specifying how to use DCAT specifically for European data portals. Next slide, please. Again, really running through what DCAT is, but I think you must have heard this acronym many times before. So just to give a quick idea, and we do provide a link to a series of 3 webinars we held and are part of the Data Europa Academy, which I strongly advise you to watch if you're interested. Giving you a short overview of the hierarchical relationships of the classes defined in DCAT. So we have the dataset, which is basically the center, which is included in a catalog and can have distributions which actually give access to the file. This is all about the metadata of the datasets, catalogs, distributions, etc. The application profile facilitates the use of DCAT in an interoperable way because it says what the cardinality is. So, for example, it would say that it says the datasets are that all catalogs must include at least one dataset. So this is mandatory cardinality, and datasets should have distributions. So this is a recommended cardinality. Okay, let's move on then. And here you can see how we actually use DCAT and observing how well publishers comply with DCAT to assess the metadata quality. You can see it on our website, either by going to the metadata quality tab in the data section and searching for the catalog you want to see, one or more catalogs. Or next slide, please. You can also see it by going to a dataset page. If you click on the quality tab there, you will see the evaluation, the metadata quality evaluation of that specific dataset. And then you can, of course, being an RDF portal and a semantic portal in a way, you can also download the data in RDF with the different serializations, so XML, Turtle, etc. So summing up a little bit, publishing on Data.europa.eu obviously gives you good visibility, increased interoperability. We have machine-to-machine endpoints, API and Sparkle, and we also have, which will soon be updated to a larger audience, the web tool for manual publishing using DCAT. On both harvesting, so automatic publishing, and the manual data team, we will, in a couple of months, have more webinars in this series, which I advise you to register to if you're interested. But one thing we should remember that even if metadata quality is excellent, but the data it describes is not, then it's not very useful, is it? And this is why my colleague now, Agnieszka, will tell you a little bit on how we support the metadata, the data quality in via the portal, and introduce some of the other features we have. Thank you. Over to you, Agnieszka.
Thank you, Hagar. So I will say now a few words about other initiatives related to data that we are trying to investigate and work with. And one of them, is, like Hagar said, is data quality, which is a quite complex topic. So to start, it's important to stress that open data is only useful if it's of good quality. The better the quality is, the easier it will be for users to reuse the data. And here I would like to tell you about a publication that we have been working on during the last years. It was published as Data.europa.eu Data Quality Guidelines. You can see the cover on the slide. This publication contains recommendations for data providers to support them in preparing their data, developing their data strategy, and ensuring data quality. If you're interested in the topic of data quality, you can also check the training session that was organized some months ago. The links will be provided with the slides. And now next slide, please. So on this slide, you can see a brief summary of what the data quality guidelines contain. So the publication has 4 parts. In the first one, we have recommendations for providing high quality data. Here we cover general aspects of quality issues regarding the findability, accessibility, interoperability, and reusability of data. Here are also included specific recommendations for common file formats like CSV, JSON, RDF, and XML. The other parts focus on data standardization with with the use of EU-controlled vocabularies, also on data enrichment, documenting data, and on improving the openness level. Also in the publication, you can find additional material like glossary, bibliography, and a table with the overview of quality indicators and metrics or checklists. As I said before, data quality is a quite complex topic, and the data has to be always accessed individually in this context. But the recommendations in the guidelines are a very good start, I think. So they come with a handful of tips that can help you improve your data quality. Next slide, please. Here I will go back to the portal to show you how to get to the distribution quality. This is an extension of the MQA about which Hagar was talked before. But the distribution quality is a quality measurement of the distribution itself. So here we actually touch the data. This feature is being intensively developed by our contractor now, and we will soon have here more properties that will be checked. This year, we are especially focusing on CSV files. We will have a kind of CSV checker. So if you are interested, good news for you, because many developments will come here. And how to get to this page? You just go to the dataset page, click on quality, scroll down, and here you have the distribution quality. And next slide, please. So this is another topic we were working on. It's data citation. I personally strongly believe that proper citation is important because it may help many people find the right source. If the source is not cited correctly, people, when reading a report or a study, may start screaming in panic, "Oh dear, where did this statistic come from?" And they can be really lost. So we would like to promote a correct way of citing to avoid confusions about the source, give credit to the authors, and in general to give more transparency. That's why we were involved in a citation project, which resulted in a publication called Data Citation, a guide to best practice. And this publication is a study, collection of best practices and recommendations in the field of data citation. If you're interested, you can watch a webinar about this study that was done with the author, Paul Jessop. Of course, you will get the links in the slides. And next slide, please. Yes, and on this slide, you can see a brief overview of what you can find in the publication. It doesn't contain only recommendations for a citation style, among others for inline citation, caption, footnote, or reference entry list, but it also discusses a lot of important issues in the field of data citation, like, for example, how to specify the cited data, how we could cite data that changes, the importance of persistent identifiers in citations like DOIs. And here I can say that if you publish your data on Data.europa.eu, you will be assigned automatically a persistent identifier for your dataset, which will always link to the correct source. So it can be very useful for citations and not only. In the publication, there is also a section about rights and licenses, so it's quite nice. The content is really quite varied. And in the annexes, you will find really useful supporting materials like checklists, examples, diagrams that can make your citing experience easier. As I said, the content of this publication is very rich and interesting. It's also written in a very friendly way, so I can only recommend it for the upcoming long autumn evenings. And next slide, please. Of course, if you are not so excited about reading the recommendations and creating citations from the scratch, no worries, we have a fast and easy way to retrieve a citation. You just go to the page of the chosen data set, click on Cite, choose a citation style, and there you get a formatted citation that you can easily copy-paste whenever you need. There is one last thing that I would like to say about these two initiatives, data quality and data citation. So we are starting with these projects, and we are really looking forward to any comments or feedback that you could have. It would be very helpful for us to understand what you need and if the direction in which we are going is the right one. At the end, we are working on these topics for use, the data providers and data reusers. So for us, it's essential to know if this is useful for you and your work. So any feedback is welcome, because for us, it's also a learning process. And now I will pass the microphone to my colleague Imma, who will continue showing you what we have on Data.europa.eu for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aga. Can you, next slide? No, first, previous one? Okay, telling stories with data. Well, if you read now a report, if you read the news, everything, there's always underlying data behind. So what we would like to emphasize here is that Data.europa.eu also offers many news, many stories with data. So we have a specific sections and several news pieces published every week, and also data stories in which we talk about different topics related to open data. So you can go from open data to achieve green transition, to how to better understand politics and how open data can help on that. What is linking data, for example, and many other projects. So we would like to highlight to you this section because it will be very, very interesting for you, but also we are very willing to talk about the stories that you would like to share with us. Next slide, please. Then, since it's a very innovative sector and it's evolving in the last year, we also think that it's very important to put all efforts in some research and also provide a learning corner. So we are involving different experts to study different angles of open data. So we have a collection of different outputs on the country insights, studies, use cases, and also the Open Data Maturity Report. So for the time being, in 2022, we have already 5 reports published that go from recommendations on how to make Data.europa.eu more reusable, what is actually the data demand from the EU public sector, what's the role of Data.europa.eu on the data spaces. There are many different angles, many different reports, and they're available to you. And there are more upcoming, such as, for example, one on improving data publishing, or another one that comes to my mind now that will be published on competition law. So we have all these reports, but we are also trying to serve your needs. So if you would like to tell us which topics you would like to read about, in which angle you think that it will be interesting to talk about, you can also tell us your story, and we will be very happy to share it with the Open Data community. Next slide, please. And then talking about studies, one of the milestones that we have is the Open Data Maturity Report. That is a yearly study, and it's an assessment done by European countries to understand what is the state of maturity throughout the years. So it benchmarks the development in open data using 4 different areas. So it targets the policy, the impact, the portal, and the quality that are very different from one another. It doesn't only try to benchmarks and study what is the general situation in each country, but it really provides some sort of recommendations and use cases to better understand the level of maturity, how they can improve in the future, etc., etc. So in general, you can see that there's you can capture the progress over time. We also try to find some areas of improvement, etc., etc. So in this year, we're trying to change a little bit the focus. We changed a bit the methodology. So we wanted to include high-value datasets in this assessment, in this questionnaire, and also how to better measure impact of open data. That is currently something that is very much in the conversations of open data. So this Open Data Maturity Report is going to go into this direction, and it will be published by the end of this year. So keep an eye on that. Next slide, please. And then just talking about learning, we have also the Data Europa Academy. We announced it previously, and this webinar is part of this content. So it's your open data knowledge hub, free for everyone, available to you for reuse. So in general, we thought that apart from giving access to data, giving some news pieces of information on open data, reports, etc., data citation, guidelines on data quality, is very important that in general we improve the open data skills across the different sectors of the society. So we provided this corner on Data.europa.eu, and you are free to access it and to browse in it. So we also wanted to divide it in 4 different areas, according also to the Open Data Maturity Report. So policy, impact, portal, and quality. And we are constantly updating it with new courses. So we encourage you to go through it from time to time and to register to our newsletter to get updated on what's the last trainings that we have available for you. Next slide, please. Okay, so in general, Data.europa.eu, how we can support you with all the information that you receive now from us. So basically with this central access point to data, we provide access to your data from the public sector. And at the same time, since it's a metadata catalog, we also increase the traffic of your portal. That is something very interesting. So at the end of the day, the users will be more redirected to your website to understand where the data comes from. It also facilitates and promotes reuse of open data with use cases, with some guidelines on data quality, etc., etc. It also facilitates interoperability and linking data, as Hagar was explaining before, due to the metadata standards that we want to follow, and we want to harmonize between all the different data publishers that we have. And at the same time, we try to help to overcome technical and legal barriers that you find on data. So we have some sort of recommendations on how to approach it. We also can share best practices from one sector or from one sector to another. We can create like some sort of a community where we can discuss about how to overcome these barriers and these barriers altogether. but we also try to stimulate and improve data management. So with these policies that we were explaining before, we also try to make a change in our society and also make a change on the way data is managed in the organization. Here it's very important that there's an exchange of knowledge, and that's why we create such discussions, such webinars, to really try to understand what are your needs, how we can support you, and really try to make some cross-check of information. And then with this, we will also to engage the user community on the importance of open data and all the benefits, because it's something that is happening now and is going to happen in the upcoming years. And open data is in the cornerstone of the overall data economy. So now with this, I pass the floor to Julia, who is going to talk to us about the potential of open data with more factual examples. Over to you, Julia.
Thank you very much, Inma. So in this last part of our today's webinar, I would like to show you the potential of open data with very practical, tangible examples, and talk about our annual EU Datathon open data competition, which I'm sure some of you are already familiar with. Next slide, please. So once you make your data open, it becomes available to the public, right? It will probably not be eaten by pandas, but it definitely can be used, and it will likely be used by many humans and machines. Well, what for? Creativity is the limit here, but definitely your data can end up being used for a completely different purpose than the one it was collected for. And that's great. This is what we call data reuse. And it is one of the reasons why people say that data is essential for economic growth, innovation, competitiveness, and all the other good things my colleagues Inma and Haga were talking about before. Next slide, please. So apart from providing access to open data, one of our goals as Data.europa.eu is to further facilitate data reuse. So to pass the message, look, all this vast amount of data is available, use it. For this purpose, we engage in a variety of communication and promotion activities listed here on this slide. But the one I would like to focus on in particular now is our open data competition, EU Datathon. The idea of the EU Datathon came as we were looking for better ways to encourage the use of data. The first edition took place over 5 years ago, and since then it became an annual event. Next slide, please. There are small changes from one year to another as to how the EU Datathon is exactly organized, but the core idea stays the same every time. Basically, we invite people from all around the world to send us ideas for applications which use at least one data set from Data.europa.eu. That is the requirement. This data can be combined with any other open data or just data. Each year, there are several thematic challenges. Well, they are thematic categories. We call them challenges. They always relate to significant real-life challenges that we face as a society. Next slide, please. Here's the example of this year's challenges. As you see, they are related to the environment, digital transformation, and public procurement. So these are the thematic categories that at the beginning of the year, we asked interested people to submit their ideas for application in. Next slide, please. To encourage people to participate, we set up a prize. So what people compete for in this competition is a cash prize. This year it's 200,000 euros in total. And there's also a public choice award. Next slide, please. The finals are organized as a public event with pitches from the finalists. So the finalists showcase their applications, they show what they have been working on, and they pitch it to a jury. There are also talks from experts in the field of data. We invite many guests to make the event more interesting. And there is also an award ceremony at the end for the finalists. EU Datathon is an interesting event in many ways, but to me personally, one thing is particularly striking, and it's every single year, and it's the potential of open data, because it's really in the moments like this that you realize what can be done with data, what amazing, really tangible things people come up with having this or that data available. So if you'd like to have a similar experience firsthand, I warmly invite you to follow this year's EU Datathon finals. They will take place on the 20th of October. You can follow the event online. You only need to register first. We will send you the link. Next slide, please. So to illustrate all that I just talked about with some real live examples, I would like to briefly show you 3 examples of applications developed by the EU Datathon finalists in the past. The first one is CleanSpot. This application provides a map of recycling facilities, encouraging people to sort their waste. As far as I know, they now operate only in Spain, but they are opening their app also for other countries around Europe, and I think even beyond Europe. So you can take a look. Apart from providing information on the location of the recycling facilities, users can also calculate how much CO2 emissions they save by recycling. They can receive notifications when mobile recycling vehicles are around and receive tips about recycling and energy savings and things like that. Next slide, please. Track My EU. This is an application which aims to bring EU decision-making closer to everyone. The app will allow you not only to find information on EU policies, but also sort, rank, filter this information based on your interests and preferences. It has a lot of filtering options, so you can set it in such a way to get informed on the things that interest you personally. Next slide, please. And the last one, it's an example that we show very often because it looks very beautiful. Geoflexus, it maps and analyzes the flow of waste. It connects regional industrial waste producers on one side with respective waste treatment facilities on the other side. Also for governments, the platform can indicate which economic sectors, materials, locations need to be addressed to achieve the highest reduction of emissions. And for companies, the app can allow a comparison of the emissions related to waste output compared to the competitors. Next slide, please. So those 3 examples that I showed you, I think are really good examples of how data can actually become information, and even more than information, it can become an innovative service. And I would really like to highlight that all these applications that I showed, they were made using open public data. I think it speaks for itself. I will leave you with this final message on the potential of data and give the floor back to Inma.
Thank you very much, Julia. So next slide, please. Great. So we hope you like this session. As I can see by the chat, I was trying to go through the questions, and there are like very interesting conversations, so we can follow up on that later. But in case of your interest, there are going to be more webinars organized for you. They're going to be very different from one another. So the first webinar we have is on the 30th of September on Friday on measuring open data impact in Europe. So we're going to have a panel discussion inviting national data portals to explain about how they measure impact. And there's going to be some sort of discussion. So maybe it will be very interesting for you to participate if you want to know more about it. Then we're going to have the first stories on the use case observatory. That is going to be a report to be delivered very soon. We can give like some examples on on how to reuse data from different actors, and it's going to take part. It's going to be on the 7th of October, and then following this Open Data webinar, we're going to have the second webinar for data providers on understanding open data, technical openness. That actually I could see that some of the questions were regarding 5-star scheme over there. So it's perfect, this question, because actually we may solve it in this specific webinar. We're going to have specific experts who are going to explain what do we intend when we're talking about openness of data, and we're going to talk about the five-star scheme. So we really suggest you to go there. Having said this, next slide. We keep in touch. This is like a first of a overall discussion. There are so many collaboration channels and so many possibilities for all of us to learn from one another. So as a first step, stay tuned. So go to our newsletter and try to register. Follow us on social media, LinkedIn and Facebook. And of course, we keep each other updated. You have also a functional mailbox that you can contact us freely to follow up on some discussions that you might find interesting. With this, next slide, Julia, before we open the Q&A, we would like to hear from you in terms of feedback. So feel free to scan it and start replying on what you think about this webinar, and we'll be very happy to know your honest opinion. So I could see that there are like many different questions, and kindly my colleagues who are here with us, were responding to most of the questions here. In general, I could see that there is like some sort of discussion regarding high value data sets, data quality, etc. So we have a collaboration channel for that. So we can send to you this collaboration channel where we can actually have a further discussion. So in this collaboration channel, we don't only invite public sector from EU institutions, agencies, and bodies, but also national, local data portals. So then we can continue the discussion on several topics. I think there was a question. Okay, I'm going to try to go through the Q&A. Yeah, so there was a question from Camila. I think was not resolved yet. So Hagar, it might be for you. It's could you explain the role of geoportals in Data.europa.eu?
Yes, really. Yes, maybe a small introduction to everyone who's not that familiar with that. So most geoportals are maintained by national countries in keeping with the Inspire directive, with its own data model, which is either Inspire, basically. What we do harvest them. Basically, we map. It's a little bit, I mean, there is a general workflow, but then we make adjustment on a case-by-case basis, and we map the properties provided using that data model to Data.AP, because on the portal it needs to land in Data.AP. So absolutely, we harvest them. We are reviewing because how well the mapping is supported, because unfortunately, when you move from one data model to another one, some things might not be reflected as well as they could be. So it's always a work in progress. We do have, I see my colleague Natalia pasted a link in the chat. So we do have specific incorporated visualization tools inside the portal to see geospatial data, so WMS, for example, and that's one component that's integrated in the portal. And yes, but we are absolutely keeping an eye about maybe a move and integration with the Geo DCAT application profile to make the harvesting even better and really capture all the data. But generally, the general answer is yes, they are a part of the portal. And I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you very much, Hagar. Well, I also see that there is like a discussion from Anastasia. So Anastasia, if you would like to open your microphone and say your question, that would be very much appreciated.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Yes, great. Thank you for absolutely amazing webinar, and indeed apologize for very many questions, but I was very interested in and passionate about. So basically, actually, I asked 3 questions, if I remember correctly. Yeah, one was related to high-value data sets, but at the very same time, indeed, your colleagues almost elaborated on it. The only point I would like to ask right now is related that you mentioned that you have several channels where to discuss on it, but for national open data portals and etc. But in the case, there are some researchers who are passionate about this, but they are not so very involved in it. So basically, this means that we are not included in these discussions, because at the very same time, I represent a research body, And together with my colleagues from different countries, we are collaborating with governments with national open data portals, but we do not have this access, and therefore we are kind of conducting this a bit separately from. Is it possible to access the same discussions, or I misunderstood something when you commented on it?
Yes, a very good point, Anastasia. Indeed, like it's very important to have different levels of like different sectors involved in the discussion. In principle, like some of these collaborations are only like for public sector, but it's true that we also try to open a channel of discussion with anyone interested. So we do it like through social media channels. We also like drop the tell us your story. So we're always willing to hear more from you in this respect, and that's why we also create this kind of discussions around this topic and these webinars. So in case you have a specific discussion you would like to follow, we'll be very happy to hear from you. So you can write us to the functional mailbox, and then we can see how we can actually serve you in this respect, and which could be like the angle of Data.europa.eu that could provide you like a better service for this.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Another question, if I may take your time a bit more, what's related to data quality. So basically what I really noticed throughout the time that when we speak about open data and open government data in particular, we are missing a bit data quality management classical perspective when we speak not only about how this data should be structured in mostly in relation to metadata when we speak about open government data, but from the data quality management perspective, it is more about the content of data. So whether these data are really reliable with the real world, whether they are complete, whether they are consistent, and by consistency is meant both internal consistency within one data set and within just different attributes and within different data sets and so on. But considering that data quality management in its traditional meaning is a very complex and it is a huge headache for third parties because we speak about the data which are made openly and publicly available by third parties, so basically external data holders who really knows what is inside, how it was collected, and etc. And actually this topic is underrepresented in open data. And even if we speak about the maturity levels, we are speaking more about how these data are provided, in which way, and whether it is a kind of qualitative way, but we are not speaking about data quality content. And as a result, there were both studies, and not only studies, but really practical examples, when people really realize that the data which are provided for the physical use is not sufficiently qualitative, so derivations from this data are not very accurate. They just lose their interest in using open data as a whole. So even if it was a matter of only one data set, but nevertheless, they really notice that the data tend to be open data, tend to be not sufficiently qualitative, and for what I will try to use other data sets if it is better for me to collect and verify the data at my end. And in this regard, was it somehow considered by you to really to be, refer to this question? Because of course, absolute data quality as a target does not exist, and it is not possible to completely and fully verify the data quality at the end of portal, for instance, but it is kind of, first of all, at least some very basic checks could be done, and the question is whether they are done, whether it is considered to be made if it is not done right now. And also the third question, which I really received very many cases from both my students and my colleagues and whatever, who is really responsible for data quality, if any? So is it a responsibility of data publishers, data holders, to verify, or data portals, or rather data users, because actually data quality is very specific question for depending on the reuse on the use case. So yes, sorry for.
No, very interesting question. I think maybe Aga, you would like to say something. I think one of the main questions I took is like on who are actually the responsibles of data quality. So Aga, you would like to intervene?
Yeah, so in general, it's a very, very complex topic, all data quality, and very difficult. From our point of view, I mean, the responsibility on the data quality lies on the producer of the data, yes, on the data provider rather. What we want to introduce in our portal is we want to have checks on the data itself, as I presented. So users can already assess a bit more, and it will be also a signal for the data provider that there are things maybe that could be made better. But I agree that this is a topic for another discussion, another webinar. But yeah.
Yeah, and actually the point I noticed, unfortunately, so basically it is more or less obvious that data providers, data publishers who really acquired and collected this data and prepared for being published should be responsible for this data quality. But unfortunately, although it sounds very obviously, but there is no awareness about it, and we are not requiring and asking them. We are rather encouraged to publish data, to open the data, yeah, but we are not saying that before it is done, do your best to make it qualitative, because in very many cases there is kind of, we have published, we open the data and you're free to use.
Yeah, but sometimes it's impossible to reuse it because it's really the quality, it's not enough. No, well, that's one of our goals is like the data literacy and trying to educate, yes, publisher and people who are data connected to data on these topics. So let's hope that we can press a bit more and and that the quality will get better, because now we have a lot of data, but it's true that sometimes the quality is not enough to make it useful.
Thank you very much. And I had the third question, but probably will give a space to other people. And in the case there will not be anyone who wants to speak, then we can return to me, because otherwise probably I will take the whole answer.
Thank you very much for the question, Anastasia, and your enthusiasm. I think it's they're very pertinent questions that should be maybe relaunched in a separate discussion. Anyway, we always are open to discuss it on some social media channels, and there are several groups for that. So I would also encourage you to join one of these discussions. I think it can be very, very useful. Finally, this knowledge sharing initiative. There's a question, and here I may ask my colleagues to intervene. Maybe you can raise your hand. So is this linked to federated? Is from Ray. It says, is this linked to federated data sharing platforms development like GaiaX? I don't know if Hagar, you can say something about it, or any of our colleagues. If not, we can check internally.
No, I'm sorry, I lost the track. The date for the data spaces. I don't know if Ray can explain the question.
Yeah, maybe Ray, if you would like to say something about this question.
Oh, I see Agnieszka already responding in the chat. So.
Okay, this is currently not very presently in the discussion with the data space or data. Okay.
Oh, how can the Open Data Portal, if I understand the question well, Ray, to correct me if I'm wrong, how can the Open Data Portal be integrated or touched by the Open Data Directive? Yeah, this is still very much a work in progress, so we don't know. But whether it's the open, at this point, not only open data portals directly, I would say that at least the data model we use, because we are talking about data sets, and if they're open or not is a different question. This will be very important. We don't want to reinvent the wheel, and this will be used, in our experience, can be very relevant for any future development. So either including the data in a separate container on the same portal, so as non-open data, or just learning from our experience and sharing the data model. I think this will be a role we cannot miss out on. So yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yes, if no, please feel free to raise your hand and we will give the floor back to you. In the meantime, there's one question open still. I think it's from our colleague Stefano. So it's, do you want to prepare guidelines on good practices about granularity in declaring datasets, as you have done on quality and citation? It refers to cases when publishers declare different datasets for different years of a same survey, data production process, or different dataset coming from the same survey. Data can be sliced, packed together, so it should be useful to recommend good practices. Actually, this is a very good point, Stefan, and it's very good that you are mentioning this to us, because we're always open to new angles or new responses to find to your questions. So actually, we may be able to discuss it further on how to prepare such guidelines or such reports, because in general, we are always very open for several topics and discussions. So it might be maybe interesting to work on this angle. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah, also I think it's very relevant because I know other European institutions working on opening up their data in a portal. So the Parliament and the Court of Auditors, for example, the question of how to represent a data series or a dataset series, it is a hot one, and also on the level of DCAT and the application profile of DCAT, it's an ongoing discussion, and it will surely evolve even more, but it definitely tries to address the need that Stefano expressed. So yes.
Another question is from Barry. Are you looking at data standards on data quality management, such as okay? These are include parts of applicable data. I don't know if you can see this question, Aga, from Barry, and if it should be also discussed with.
Yes, I was trying to find it in the document. But yes, thank you for the tip. If it's not there, we will for sure start looking at it, because I'm not sure it was included in the project because we started a couple of years ago. So yeah, but we are still in the process for the other things. So yeah.
And then, Cipriano was asking for the due to connection problem. Yes, on the relation between the geoportals and Data.europa.eu. Yes, Hagar answered this question before. And then he's asking how to make it integrated and interoperable, the inclusion of geodata portals and Data.europa.eu.
Yes, I will answer in the chat because I don't want to, because you already answered the invoice, so I will answer.
Yeah, maybe you can answer to the second question more in detail, like.
About sorry, I was lost on answering the first one. So yes, the integration basically is done using the mapping we do from mostly ISO Inspire geoportals to DCAT. I think it will be enhanced once Geo DCAT application profile will be more widely adopted, hopefully by geoportals, or we try to map to better from Inspire to Geo DCAT application profile. So that will definitely work to increase interoperability. But I will finish the answer in the chat as well. So.
Thank you. I don't know if anybody else would like to raise their hands to ask a question or something. If there are no more questions, maybe we can close the session. Anyway, we are still here. You can write us an email whenever you want, or contact us via social media, and we will be very happy to follow up from this webinar. Anyway, we'll see you maybe very soon on the upcoming webinars, so keep an eye on them, and we will send you all also all the materials when they're ready online. We're gonna wait a few more minutes.
I see.
About the yes,
Elsa's
hello, yes, would you like to say something else?
If I have a minute.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, thanks. Even, and I confess here to everyone, I'm part of the team of the presenters, and I learned a lot also, and I also learned a lot by reading the chat, and I think we can try to play a central role to continue this discussion together, because it would be a pity to lose this. So if you're interested in a specific topic, for example, high-value data sets or data quality or geoportals or whatever, write to us with what your questions would be, and then we can try to group people together and set up a written or even a video chat brainstorm to follow this up. And thank you all for this inspiration.
Thanks to you, Els. And actually, it's a very good idea. So that could be a potential follow-up. So because we see that there are like different type of discussions. So we have on one side data quality and the more technical discussion. Then we have also like the more policy perspective on the legislation, high value datasets implementing act. So we can follow it up. But yeah, I hope this webinar was interesting for you. So I think there are no further questions, so we can maybe stop recording. And I would like to thank you very much for all your attention. I really hope you found this useful.